Hello and welcome to the second video for the EPQ project. This is designed to follow on from the previous video, and it is focused on how to form a question and why the character Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory would fail in EPQ. So if you are creating a diary, if you are starting to make notes, it would be useful to just get that down as a heading. If you want to take any notes as you're going through this, that might be useful as well. You've got your booklets already, so you can have a look at them. The main focuses of today are really focusing in on the key skills that are required to achieve high marks in the EPQ and how these skills can be evidenced in a project. We're then going to take this newfound knowledge and trying to plan it to the initial topic areas that you might be interested in. It's great to see so many people already are messaging me and saying, is this an appropriate question? In terms of topic areas so far, lots of people have got very good topic areas, but we need to make sure that the question is appropriate to get good marks for an EPQ. So that's what the purpose of this video is. So I'm going to choose a topic that I don't think anybody will go for, and I would argue that you shouldn't go for, largely because this video covers it, and actually that might be detrimental to your marks as a whole. Nobody's approached me with this kind of question, and if I was to approach an EPQ, this is a kind of topic that I might be interested in. And this is also something that Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory, if you watch that, is interested in as well. So let's say that I wanted to do an EPQ on flags, or to give it its correct term, vexillology. If you watch Big Bang Theory, you'll know that Sheldon Cooper does lots of videos, little mini videos about vexillology, and he calls it Fun with Flags. And the point of this video is to showcase how you could take that overall topic area of flags, create a question that's appropriate for the EPQ, but also understand why Sheldon Cooper, for example, would not get good marks for the EPQ if he chose his specialist subject, which would be flags as well. So the first thing that I would want to do is I would want to make this topic narrow. Now, I can't just do a 5,000 word essay just on that generic topic of flags. So I'm going to have to narrow that down, but I don't want to be too narrow like Sheldon Cooper. So if you watch some of the videos on YouTube with Fun with Flags, he'll take a state flag, for example, or a very specific flag, and he'll just describe and say exactly what it is. So we don't want to be too narrow. So if I'm going to study this topic of flags, the first thing that I would do is I would write down a number of different ideas that might fit into that overall topic area. So I might want to focus in on the flags of Great Britain. I might want to focus in on the flags of Warwickshire and Solihull, for example. The flag is a bear, and it has connotations that go alongside it. I might want to focus in on the United States flag. I might want to focus in on the South African flag, and I might want to look at comparing flags as well. So the whole point of this is to make sure that I'm considering different options within that overall topic area. So if my question, for example, was on pandemics, I might want to write down a number of different pandemics that I might want to focus in on. So the current coronavirus, the Spanish flu pandemic, the Great Plague, the Black Death, the HIV and AIDS pandemic of the 1980s, and those would be my sub areas of focus. Now, once I've got those particular sub areas, I need to start creating some questions. And in order to create some questions, we need to think about what the central thinking skills are that are used and assessed in the EPQ. Now, the first thing that's assessed is describing or passing on information. Now, that's giving a detailed account of something in words. Now, that's kind of what Wikipedia does. Wikipedia is purely a description-based service. It doesn't really offer too much else. Now, what we don't want for our EPQs is to just describe, and I'll talk about what that means in a second. The next key skill that you're assessed on is analysing, and analysing is about breaking down something in order to understand its true meaning. Once we do that, what we usually do is we then synthesize different ideas together to make new combinations or solve problems. We then follow that up by applying our own knowledge and our own understanding and our own opinions to that synthesis, and it's usually going to lead to some sort of outcome. And at the very end, what we can do is we can evaluate and we can make judgments from evidence. So the EPQ assesses all of those particular key skills, but the most important one for you, the one that you really need to focus in on, is this very final one about evaluating which is essentially making a judgment. So your EPQ needs to be a judgment-based process. So it can't just be a description. You can't just say here's what's happened, because that's something that really you could get from something like Wikipedia. Now, what we need to do is we need to refine our topic areas and our questions, and that's how we can actually get marks for the EPQ. So the EPQ is broken down into 4 different assessment objectives, and assessment objective 1, which is management of the project, is about you identifying your topic correctly, identifying project aims and objectives, and refining that question. So it's okay at this stage if you've got a topic that you might change your mind from. It might be okay if you've got a question that isn't quite appropriate at this stage. What you need to be able to do is you need to be able to have that clear process by which you by how you create an effective question in the end. So we're all aiming for those top marks, and it's at this particular stage that you can start picking up marks for the EPQ. So let's go back to the topic area of flags. So I've said already that we're trying to make evaluative questions, questions that lead to a judgment, and we don't want descriptive based questions. I've narrowed down that big topic area into something smaller, and I've come up with a few ideas. So let's say that I'm interested in the flags of Great Britain, so the Union Jack, or the Union flag as its correct name is, and the rainbow flag of South Africa. And let's say that I call the flag of Great Britain X and the rainbow flag of South Africa Y. Now what I want to do is I want to make sure that I create some questions which are basic descriptive questions, then analytical questions, then synthesis questions, then application questions, and finally evaluation questions. And once I get to the evaluation stage, that's where I can create some strong questions that potentially I could use for my EPQ. Now, descriptive based questions usually have these question stems. Now, these are the kinds of questions to avoid. So what we don't want is to have a question that says, what is the history of the Great Britain flag? That is a descriptive question, and it wouldn't get you a strong mark for the EPQ. Those kinds of question stems are things to avoid. Likewise, analytical based questions are question stems that you should also avoid. So if you're creating a question, what you can do is you can pause the two slides that I've shown here on analysis and description, and try and make sure that you've avoided those basic kinds of questions. Synthesis and application-based questions can work. So these kind of question stems are appropriate for an EPQ, and you can create questions that are alike to the ones that are on the screen now. But your main type of questions that you should be focusing in on are these evaluation-based questions. Now, there's some question stems that are on the screen there that are kinds of question stems for evaluation, but they're not the only ones. There are other kinds. Essentially, what you are trying to do is you are trying to come up with a question that is going to lead to a judgment at the very end, something that you can make a judgment that is possible for you to make. Now, if you think about the topic of flags and the topic of Great Britain flag or the rainbow flag, it might be useful to maybe pause this video at this particular point and try and come up with some initial questions on that particular topic. And then what you can do is you can restart this video and see what kinds of questions I've come up with, what kind of questions wouldn't be appropriate. So if I was to go for my topic area of flags, these are the kinds of questions that I should avoid. These are questions which are not evaluative and are largely descriptive or analytical based. So essay questions like, what is the history of the Union Jack? Who designs flags? Why do we have red, white and blue on the Union Jack? Wouldn't be appropriate at all. It wouldn't be possible for me to reach 5,000 words with those kinds of questions. If I was to create an artifact, if I was to use those basic skills of description and with analysis, and I was to have an artifact which was how to draw the Union Jack, like a video saying here's how to draw the Union Jack, that wouldn't be appropriate because I'm not testing those higher evaluative level skills. Question. And you also need to think about these particular things. Is it a question that is safe? So is it something that's going to lead to potential hazards? Now, in the case of artifacts, it might be that in the current lockdown processes, that might not be possible for you. It might not be possible to get the materials that you need. Is it practical with the resources that you have at your disposal? It's the case probably that we don't have access to libraries, but can you get all the materials that you want and need from an online perspective? Is it ethical as well? Is it a question that's going to cause distress? Is it going to respect people's right to choose not to be involved if you're using a questionnaire, for example? We'll talk about that in a later lecture. But with this ethical problem, or if it is a problem, just note that when you have a question approved, we have to decide whether or not it's ethically viable. So we will tell you if there is any problems. Is it accessible? So is it the kinds of materials that you can access at this stage of your academic careers? And is it extended? Is it something that's not covered in your A-level subject studies? So it's now over to you, and it's your turn to go through these steps with your own special subject. Now it's okay at this point if you're still coming up with a few different ideas and you're refining your topics and you're doing a bit of research. That's great. You can continue to do that for a few more weeks. That's not a problem. But what might be useful as well is take those different areas. So the example I've given you today is flags. Break it down into subsections like I've done. Come up with 5 questions you could ask for each skill stage, so description, analysis, synthesis, application, and evaluation, and ultimately look at those evaluation questions and think about how they could be tweaked into some potential essay questions and artifact ideas. So that's your focus for this particular week's lesson. It might be useful as well to make sure that you've got that AQA production log at your disposal, and you can start completing the first 2 boxes for page 5 of your production log. That's your initial research and your initial ideas, so you can write down what you're thinking, what kind of questions you're coming up with at this particular point. Thanks very much for watching, and hopefully you can tune in next week for the next lecture.